Hey, in this video, I would like to share how you can use GitHub Actions and then K3s to solve the problem of testing your application. It can be an operator as well to test on different versions of Kubernetes. In my case, we have an application where we have to test the operator that we built using Operator SDK on different versions of Kubernetes. And then I'm going to show you how you can test that kind of operator application on top of different versions of Kubernetes. With that, let's get started. There's a simple readme file here in this location. It's Debian master / GitHub action examples, and then in this K3s matrix testing. Before we start, I would like to share a few things. With respect to K3s, as in K3s is a lighter version of Kubernetes, but mostly compliant with all the APIs of Kubernetes. So pretty much I've never seen a case where K3 it works on Kubernetes but doesn't work on K3s. So I use K3s for most of the testing purposes and also for local development environment. Kubernetes K3s itself has a different versions of Kubernetes. You can see the matrix here. So K3s initially used a separate tagging like 061 is 1.14 of Kubernetes, but later they switched to the naming convention as that of Kubernetes. So if I want to test on Kubernetes 1.14.6, this is the version of K3s I need to use. That's how I did the matrix. So I only picked up the latest ones on each major version. So for 1.18, this is one I'll pick up, and 1.17, this is the one I pick up, like that. Okay. So with that, let's get started. For us to test across different versions of Kubernetes, we are going to use something called as matrix testing on GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions is a built-in CI/CD to integration for any of your repositories. So on code push, maybe this is your operator code. Whenever you push code to your master, you can also control on what branches you can execute this. What happens is, on a Ubuntu latest image, think of it as like a VM provisioned by GitHub for you, which has mostly like root access as well. And then on this VM, what we are going to do is, for each of these versions, so in the matrix you can see for each of these version, this code will be executed. This is the meaning of it, right? So this naming convention can be anything. So in this case, I used K8's version, but this is a keyword that you need to use for making sure you run this for multiple times. Okay, so with that, let's get started. So what we have done here is we're trying to spin up a Kubernetes environment, which is nothing but our K3s environment, and then export the file that is generated, the kubeconfig file that is generated into a into this Ubuntu machine, and then use that kubeconfig to test the whole thing. Okay, so in this case, you can see first I'm assuming the location of kubeconfig will be here. This is a future location where once we run the Docker instance of K3s, this file will be generated. And then I'm exporting the K3s version, which is nothing but this, into an environment variable so that I can use it for later purposes. And then for whenever we run the K3s instance as a Docker container on top of this Ubuntu machine, if we pass this environment variable called K3s kubeconfig output, what this instance does is it is going to start a K3s or Kubernetes cluster inside this Docker container and generate the kubeconfig file and put it in this location. So you can see this is the output inside the container, and then I'm mapping that to the Ubuntu host folder location here. Okay, and after that, the output generation, the kubeconfig generation is not really like instant. It takes a couple of seconds to generate. So what I'm doing here is I'm just waiting for that file to be generated, and then making sure like I sleep for some time before I frequently check. Obviously, there is some scope of improvement here where you can say there is a timeout part need to be implemented, which is not there clearly, but you can work on it. So once the kubeconfig file is available, we already have the environment variable set to this location where the file has been generated. And then if you do kubectl get nodes and then also pods, you can see the k3s instance up and running with the version that you have asked for. Okay, so it's very straightforward. The only things you need to remember is you need to start a k3s container and then make sure whatever kubeconfig that is generated can be used on top of this Ubuntu latest image. One good thing about this GitHub Actions Ubuntu latest image is it already contains kubectl, so you don't need to run any apt-get install kubectl commands at all. But if you need any other testing tools like Cuttle or maybe some other operator framework SDK testing, those CLI tools you have to install on top of this. I suggest for testing you can use Cuttle, which is very easy to use actually for testing any operator kind of environment. But this is for another topic, another day. All right, let's see the output for this one. So this whole thing has to be executed for all these instances. That's the whole purpose. I have a sample application where I have already done it. I'd like to show the output. And then if you look at the actions here, this is just matrix testing I've done. So you can see the whole thing got executed for each of them parallelly. So this is a nice thing. You can run this in a parallel fashion. And if you look at my actual test case, it lists down the nodes here, which is one node obviously because I'm starting only one container. The pods, you can see it is no resources found. That is because it takes some time for K3s to complete the installation. That is why you see the pods are empty. But if you give it some time, some sleep time, it will also show you pods as well. And then later on, you can start your own code or your own CLI commands, which will test your operator. So I hope this is useful. If you have any improvements or any suggestions that you would like to give, you can definitely reach out to me on Twitter, Debian Master. I'm sure I'll try to help. I try to help on your use case if at all it is interesting for me as well. Okay, thank you very much. Have a good day.